You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome back to Everything Out There on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. I'm Steve Stockton. Welcome in. Tonight, joining me once again, Cisco from, what's the name of your show? Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast.
Did you have a brain lock up?
Yeah. She's a paranormalist. She's an author. And we're going to talk about some classic paranormal and supernatural TV shows from way back in the day. Come on in here, Cisco. How you doing?
How's it going? It's good to be here. Good to be back.
I've got baby brain. We went to the OB today. Baby's chugging right along. Heart sounds good. Everything's looking good. But it's all I can think about.
I bet. Well, you got to get in that mode because that's all you're going to be able to think about for a long, long time.
Yeah, somebody told me I ought to stick my head in a barrel and holler daddy. So that's okay.
Oh, it's going to be fun. I'm going to watch them grow up. It's going to be a wonderful thing. I can't hardly wait.
Mom wished it on me. Ooh, someday I hope you have a son that's just like you.
Honey, my mama told me, I still remember how she looked when she said we're standing in the kitchen at Oakhurst, New Jersey, probably around 1973. And she looked at me, she said, I hope you have 5 that are just like you. And I said, well, I'll never forget it. And she pointed at me. She meant it too. It was like a curse. And I had two boys that were like a dozen. I had 2 boys that were like a dozen. So she got it. That's all right.
I'm excited to be a boy, Dad. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
You need any pointers? I'm right here. I got mine. It was a rocky road, but they lived through it.
I think it's going to be easier with a boy than it was with a girl, but remains to be seen. Different types of problems, I'm sure.
I'll tell you what, it's the best thing in life either way,
Well, I guess we better get to talking paranormal TV. We sat here and talked for half an hour.
We've been on the phone for a while now. Yeah, so that was it. We were talking, you were on my show this weekend, and we always do those great Monday shows. We have a blast. And I started talking about it Sunday on my show. Started looking at a lot of these older paranormal shows. I mean, they're great across country. We found by digging into them, we discovered the wonderful, The Extraordinary out of Australia. If nobody's ever heard that one, it's fantastic. The host is Warwick Moss. I'll never forget it. He's wonderful and very similar to, I'd say, an Unsolved Mysteries, wouldn't you, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. And just different part of the world, but the same format, same type of show. Very, very good
stuff. Wonderful reenactments, the history, the backstory, the way they tell the story. Very similar to like the Unsolved Mysteries. If the person is there, the witness, they'll have an interview with them, or maybe bring in an expert or whatever you want to call an expert, somebody who at least has knowledge of the subject you're talking about, and they bring them in, and the way they did it, the format was great. He was a great host. The range was really good because you'd have everything from the fun stories like the woman who lost her wedding ring on the beach, walking with her husband or whatever. And, her son later, I'm making this part up, but it was similar to this. Her son, their son was fishing or something and caught a fish and they cut it open. There was the ring, or those kind of stories, those crazy, wild, believe it or not type things. Yeah. But also ghost stories like our favorite, mine and yours. I mean, gosh, out of at least in the top 100, it would have to be, maybe even the top 10. But the Telly Savalas ghost story.
That's one of my favorite of all time.
Tell
and
it.
Then the second part of that.
For the listeners.
Basically, Telly was a young man. He was
Kojak, good old Kojak.
Upstate New York, I think is where this happened.
Yeah, I believe so.
Was it in L.A.? I don't remember.
It was anyway, New York, I believe.
He ran out of gas, and he's walking along trying to find a gas station. It's the middle of the night. Did he have a gas can? I don't remember that part. But anyway, he ran out of gas. He's trying to find a gas station. He doesn't have any money, and somebody stops to pick him up, and it's a guy in a nice car wearing a white suit, and he had a real high-pitched voice like this. And
That's creepy, like one of the
Yeah, that's the creepiest
one
voice ever. Well, anyway, he takes him to the gas station, all night gas station, gives him $1 or $2 or three, whatever it was, to buy some gas. Takes him back to his car, helps him get it. So I think he had to push him to get it
push
started.
the car. And Telly emphasized that. And we forgot the key thing. When he pulled over, what did he say, Steve? I'll give you a ride.
Yeah, that's the scariest part. And Telly, said I was
Wow.
embarrassed.
Wow.
I said, let me pay you back. And the guy gave him a card with his address. As a card for a bar or something, a business card. And he put his name and phone number. I guess the phone number is already on there. But Telly was going to send him the money back. And and he ended up calling the number on the card, asked for this person. And they said, hold on a minute. And then a woman gets on the phone.
This boy,
And
this is
she gets mad, hangs up
he's
on him,
fire mad.
and he calls back. He said, I want to talk to this man. He gave me this card. And she's like, you son of a, you know what? He's been
Yes,
dead
he did.
for 2 or 3 years or whatever. But he ended up going and meeting with the lady, and they compared the writing where the guy had written his name on the back of the card. It did look like his writing, but the guy had been dead. And
Yeah,
then later
yeah.
on,
He cut his own throat or something, or something like that, didn't
he
he?
shot
What a
himself in
horrible
the
thing.
throat, I think. He shot
Yeah,
himself
it's
in the throat
horrible. That's why his voice was like that.
because,
And
yeah, the lady said, and Tilly's like describing him. He had on a
right.
white suit, and she's like, "That's what he was buried in." But
Yep,
he had,
yep.
had
Same
this
thing.
real high pitched voice, and she's like, "Oh no, he had a
Oh,
deep voice like yours." But then later, he was playing. I think he was in Los Angeles at this time. He was playing golf
Oh,
with Dennis
yep,
James,
yep.
the host of the Nighttime Price is Right. Later on. And he said they played like the seventh hole, the eighth hole, the ninth hole, and then they went in the clubhouse to get some lunch. And no, I left out part of it. While they were out there playing
Back
golf,
up one. Make a
up
U-turn.
up on the hill, he
There you
sees
go.
the same guy in the white suit. He
On the
calls down
912.
and like, "Hey, friend," and he says,
Yeah,
"Did you hear what happened in Dallas?" And
yep.
I think he went ahead and said they shot the president or something like that, or
He
maybe just
just
said,
said, "Did you
"Oh,
hear what happened in Dallas?"
oh,
And
and I
then
left out
something
something
else.
from the first part. When he picked him up in the car the first time,
Oh yeah. Oh
he
yeah.
said, "Do you know of some baseball player?"
Yes,
And
yes.
I don't think Telly had heard of him. He's like, "I know him." Well, he found out the next day that baseball player had died,
But
so that
died
was
at
already
the same
spooky.
time he was telling him about it. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
well,
And he
this
said they
time
weren't talking about baseball. They had just pulled it out of the
he
air, and he
just pulled
told
it
him,
out of the air and
and it
said,
was
"I
a
know
fact that
him."
happened next day. Yeah. So he's
And
on the ninth hole, and the guy says, "Hey," but I think he called him by name. He said, "I
well,
believe."
I think he was like on
Did
the
you hear?
sixth or the seventh hole, and
Yeah.
the guy called him by name and said,
Yep.
"Hey, did you hear
Did you
what
hear what?
happened
Yeah.
in Dallas?"
That's it. Yeah.
And then
Yep.
waved at him and moved on. Well, then they played a couple more holes. Then they went in the clubhouse to eat some lunch. They
Got a
sat down,
sandwich. Got a
and as
sandwich.
their food was being served, or maybe they were finishing up, then Walter Cronkite breaks in on
Yep.
CBS and said, President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas.
Yep.
And there you go. So
And he said like an hour and a half before he had been told on that at that golf course, but
but
from the
that's
guy on the
one of
hill
my
had an
favorite
umbrella.
ghost
I think
stories
he said the guy
ever.
had, which is weird.
And Telly, he's a no bullshit kind of guy. I
Right,
mean,
right,
he's
right. Rough and tumble. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yep. Yep.
I believe every word of it. But
I do too.
the thing that you and I want to know, and if anybody listening out there knows, Telly said he was talking to the interviewer, and he said, "There's more to this story, but I'm not going to tell you that." And he left it hanging like that.
Yep. He sure did.
And
Yep.
we've
Because,
searched in books, biographies about Telly,
yep.
interviews, something. I want
His
to know
brother's
what the
book.
part was he didn't tell that guy. Yeah, George Savalas, he died before Telly did. I was hoping maybe he knew.
He might have wrote the book. Maybe
But
one of Telly's wives. Was he married, Steve? Do you remember?
I think he was
I bet
married
you he was
several
in a
times.
marriage. Let's look it up. I bet you he was in a marriage that long time and never strayed. I bet you he was that kind of guy.
He
I
was
bet
that kind of
he
guy.
just had so much self kind of respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a guess, but it's probably a good one. Let me see.
But I want to know the rest of that story.
I do
And
as well.
somebody somewhere knows. He's told it to somebody, I bet you. He just didn't want to tell it to that guy because he'd already gave him two really good parts of it. But if anybody out there has ever heard the third part of the Telly Savalas ghost story, get in touch. You can. My email address should be in the show description, but stevestockton81@gmail.com. Let me know if you know the third part or more of that Telly Savalas ghost story. It's one of the best ghost stories I've ever heard.
Absolutely true. Okay, so Telly. Okay, so his name. Oh my gosh, it's all Greek to me, Steve.
Yeah.
Aristoteles. Aristoteles is his first name. Telly Savalas, January 21st, 1922 to January 22nd. Wow, 1 day difference. 1994.
And
Was
I
an
think his
American actor
brother
noted for his bald
George,
head and deep resonant voice.
I
Yep.
think George died in 85 or 87 or something like that. So he'd been dead a while. So we thought maybe
Absolutely.
George knew, but George isn't with us any longer. But yeah, I want to see if he has kids, if he has an ex-wife, if he has, any other siblings that are
Bastards. Here
still
we
around.
go. Here we go. We're going to find out right now. Catherine, whew, she was Greek too, I'm guessing. Nicolaides, married 1948, divorced, okay, 1957, so 10, 11 years.
Yeah, now
And then
this
the
would have
next
been
one was
after that, I think,
1960.
at least the
Yeah,
Kennedy part.
1960, 1974 was Marilyn. And then Julie, 1984 till his death. So 10 years apiece.
Does
Three
it
of them, 10 years apiece.
does it
That's
list any
not bad.
kids there? And I guess you're looking at Wikipedia.
Well, yep, six. That's if this is accurate. He's got six, including Ariana Savalas. It doesn't list them all. It just says there's six.
And I think she's an actress or a singer or something.
Ariana Savalas. I don't know. Let's find out.
So
Wow.
if you know any of Telly's relatives, friends, family, get in touch with us. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
American singer, songwriter, and burlesque performer. She has performed in burlesque cabarets worldwide, including as the MC and singer for Dita Von Tessie. That sounds correct.
Oh, Dita Von Teese. I bet I may have seen her in Vegas. I used to do
All right,
photography for a
there
burlesque
you go.
group out there. So I may have taken pictures
You
of her.
may have
Didn't
seen
even
her.
know it.
And at the Crazy Horse Cabaret in Paris. Well, now, there you go. She's a
Well,
hottie, too.
that's she's
Pretty
still
girl.
alive. Then we'll get a hold of her and see. Did your dad ever tell you any ghost
Tell you
stories?
the rest of that story. Tell us the rest of the story.
Like Paul Harvey. And now we know the rest of the story.
Yeah. So there you go. So what are we talking about? TV shows.
You're
How did
talking
we get
about
on?
TV shows.
Oh,
Well,
yeah. So that
that
was
was
on
on
the
a TV
extraordinary.
show. So
That's
there you
just
go.
one of them. That's just one of them. That's the extraordinary. And again, out of Australia. So if you've never seen that, there's videos and episodes, full episodes on the inner tubes for the listeners. If you like ghost stories, UFO stories, abduction stories, and Telly Savalas is in there somewhere, at least most of the story. But it's a heck of the part you get. Steve's right. This is one of the most incredible end to end story. It has everything. Premonition. It's got a ghost pulling up in a ghost car. Steve, wearing
Predicted the
the
death of
clothes
the
it was
baseball
buried in.
player.
Do what? What'd you say? I think I lost you. Did I lose you?
And I
I'm,
think one of us was I'm
yeah, I'm
here
here
now.
too. Okay, so we're here. Okay, so that story's got everything. So you figure it's got a ghost driving up in the ghost car in the clothes he was buried in, talking with the funny voice. I'll give you a ride because he did something to his throat. Poor thing. He gives them a piece of paper, so there is a passing of a physical item. Okay, his handwriting, his phone number, which works, connects to the wife, who's so astonished. At first, she cusses him out, and I think that tickled Telly. To
Yeah, he ended up going
he,
down there.
he that just lit him up right there. He just loved that, and 'cause she told him to go straight to hell. And
I
called him a
think
bastard or
one
something.
bizarre went it out on
Yeah,
Long Island or somewhere. I,
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
Oh,
need
it's
to go back
beautiful.
and watch that again.
She slammed the phone down just like we used to be able to do when we had those kind of phones, and called her right back and told her again about the story. He said, I believe his words were it was too much. They had to meet. The signature, the way he described him to her. That was his car. That was his car. So how does a ghost make a car physical like that, Steve?
And he helped
So you're
Telly push
sitting in
his
it,
car.
and
He
he
had money. He
he
was
got
carrying money.
out. Yeah.
Ghosts carry money with them. This one did anyway.
Yeah, and he got out and pushed Telly's car, gave him cash money. I believe it was $1. if I
And Ghost
recall.
is right. He wrote his name and
Yeah, yeah,
address on there.
yeah, yeah. And then predicted. Now we sit there predicting the poor baseball players' demise, right? And accurately so, because the next day it's in the headlines until he's reading it in the paper. So you've got premonition, foretelling future.
It's the gamut. That's why that's the ultimate
Hmm,
ghost story, I think, right
hmm.
there.
And then come back and predict hey, do you hear what happened in Dallas?
Yeah,
A full hour before it's announced on national TV. I believe it was maybe an hour and change.
yeah.
I
He
think
said
that's
about an
what
hour
tells
and
us.
a half before.
Yeah, yeah. So there, I mean, just it's got it all, folks. It's got it all, and a mystery at the tail end where he's got to be a cheeky monkey and say, "Well, there's a little bit more, but I'm not going to tell you." So what? Because
Thanks,
that's the
Kelly.
kind of guy Telly is, because he's got that respect. He's got that kind of. There was some kind of things you just didn't, you
Yeah,
know, say.
he got some chutzpah there. He got some
Yeah,
cojones on him. He
yeah,
just, this is all I'm going to tell you.
yeah, yeah. Plus, he's covering for a friend, or he's covering for out of respect for somebody else, or it's off color and doesn't want. He'll hint towards things, but that's just how people were back then. I mean, look at Yul Brenner
And
and
the way he tells it is just so
yeah.
matter of factly.
Oh, yeah. It's just yeah. It's like your dad never talks about anything, doesn't make full paragraphs, like your 1950s dad or something comes home, looks at the paper, puts his slippers on, just turn, whatever the game, doesn't want to hear really, those kind of fictional dads don't say anything. And then all of a sudden busting out with this like amazing, you know, like he's believed all along kind of thing. It's like, well, I'll tell you a story, you know, you kids ain't got
Yeah, he
nothing,
said, well, let me tell you a story. I got a
Yeah.
ghost story. Let me tell you this story.
Yeah. And he says, if you want to hear it, I'll tell you. That's how he starts out. If you want to hear it, I'll tell you. If you're going to listen, I'll tell you. But, I don't want any crap for it. That kind of thing. He's like, don't even look at me funny. He just has that kind of reputation. Who loves you, babies? It's probably, thank you, Telly, because that's probably the best ghost
Yeah,
story ever.
only Telly
But,
Savalas could shave his head and walk around with a lollipop and sunglasses and a little pork pie hat on his head and
and be the
rock it and make it
baddest
look
son
be
of a
the
bitch walking down the street.
baddest mother
Yeah.
on the street in
Yeah,
New York.
absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree.
And that
Yeah.
term Kojak, that's in the 70s and 80s. That was because you remember anywhere Telly went, New York City, there's a parking spot right out front of the building. And we go somewhere with my friends. We found a spot up front. We'd say, "Oh, look, we Kojaked."
Kojak.
Yeah.
Yep. Because he always pulled right up front, was always spot for Telly. I'll tell you what, that's just how he was. I loved it. I loved that show too.
He
But
was
it
one of
wasn't a
those guys.
paranormal show. That was
He was,
a very realistic cop show
yeah,
that he was
he was
in.
a ladies'
But
man and a man's man. I mean, he was
yeah,
all business
yeah,
but
I liked him.
remember he had the Players Club International, the little
Yeah,
card that he
yeah,
hawked there for a while,
yeah.
and
Suave. I believe it was Suave.
yeah,
He was,
very
yeah, he
suave
was extremely cool. He was very like liquid cool.
his
You know,
brother George, they didn't even look related. A little short, fat guy with curly hair.
correct. So right, so right, so. And I'll tell you something. If you ever saw Telly with hair, it would horrify you.
Yeah, it just doesn't
I,
look
I
right.
saw it once, and it's like we're looking at Sam Elliott without a mustache. It shouldn't be
Yeah,
done. Shouldn't be
yeah,
done.
what I watch,
My eyes.
Frogs or something from the 70s, and he's in that. He plays the naturalist or something. No mustache. It
Yeah,
doesn't even look like him. Like, is that him? And then you hear the voice, and it's like, okay, yeah, that is
yeah,
him. But
that's
it
Sam.
doesn't look like
It's
him.
terrible. It's disturbing. I can't do it. You know. But it's just very bothersome. It's funny how we get used to stuff like that. So that's one show, folks. The Extraordinary from Australia.
That's just one show. We've got a whole list here. We may have to make this a multi-parter.
Well, another one too was Creepy Canada. Now, some of these titles may confuse you. I don't believe as much on the Extraordinary. That's really easy to find on the internet.
I
But
don't think I've ever
Creepy
heard of Creepy
Canada,
Cannon. I don't think I've
it
ever
cha-
heard of it.
it changed like twice. I've seen it aired under three different names now. I think what happens is they'll sell off, a couple seasons of a show or whatever. Somebody will buy them in a group. I guess almost like you're going to buy a handful of clearance at the Blockbuster or something, get a
Yeah.
bunch of movies. You don't know
Oh,
what
and
you
you
got. You got to
go
take
into
them
the
all.
gas station. You started with video cassettes. You could get
Yeah.
video cassettes for like $5 or 3 for 10 or whatever. Oh, and then they did that with DVDs and CDs and stuff. So yeah, the cutout bin or the some of that
Yep.
stuff, once it was in the public domain, anybody could make copies and print boxes, and then you
Yep.
could sell them for cheap. They bought those tapes and this in bulk, and anybody could do it. There's a lot of stuff that was in public domain. So I don't know that that was, but a lot of times TV stations would buy packages where like, well, we'll sell you the first 2 seasons for this amount. They buy it and then they could run it with their affiliates or the local stations or whatever. So things like that, once it gets into syndication, it can show up anywhere. I think I lost you or you lost me.
Are you there now?
Yeah, now I'm here.
Okay. The
Thanks,
what I was saying. That's bad, isn't it? I think like with Creepy Canada, I knew it was them because they always had this maple leaf, which was I always thought was kind of cool for our Canadian friends. And it just I'm like I saw this before this whole format, but this name is different. And then it showed up somewhere else under another name. So I think they do that a lot with not just the paranormal with other shows. We probably notice it a lot with paranormal, but the new ones are doing that a lot. They must be shifting around from channel to channel. I was watching one that jumped that was a big show that spanned a couple of decades. The way it fell was Ghost Hunters, and I think that was probably one of the not I don't want to say the first that ever did investigation because Most Haunted was out, and that was in the UK. But if you had to go back, I think probably the first one that really started doing it, it wasn't a television show, but it was a radio show. And that was Ghost Watch. And that was Peter Underwood out of the UK. And that was probably 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
I was trying to look back to see when was the first ghost hunting type of thing. And you have to go back earlier than that. And that's Harry Price.
Yeah.
Because he did do those things. He did have seances, and clinical kind of what he would call clinical experiments. I guess they're not only at the Borley rectory there in the UK. Where is that, Steve? Is that by Lancashire? I think it is.
I think so. That sounds right. My geography of that country is a little shaky.
Yeah, mine as well. So don't get mad at me if you're across the pond. But anyway, nevertheless, I think those guys started it. I know that if you asked me who was the first one to use Ghost Hunter, a lot of people might jump and say Hans Holzler, or someone around that era. But you'd have to go back to Harry Price again because that was like 1938. And I don't recall if anybody before that used Ghost Hunter. But his first book was what was it? A lifetime with a ghost hunter or something like that.
A lifetime as a ghost hunter or something like that. Yeah,
close to it. But he did use Ghost Hunter on the cover of the book. I've seen it, and to go back into television, and I think to reach back, I was looking at it today. We were going to talk about this, and it's interesting to see because it shifts with, of course, culture and what's popular in pop culture and everything else. And what people are interested in, that's what's had the whole spiritualism movement going in the first place, right after the First World War, and everybody's losing so many people that they care about. Of course, they're interested in looking for a diversion at the same time, and they're having secret dinner parties and tea and cakes, and then bringing out the Ouija board or the seance table or whatever.
That was how my mom's side of the family, how my grandma and all those people got involved in spiritualism. They lost, I think it was my mom's great uncle or somebody in World War I. He never came home. They never got word that he had died, but they decided they wanted to do this to try to get in touch with him. And the seances and the Ouija boards and stuff never would tell them that he had died. So they believe he just took a powder and stayed in Europe or went somewhere else and didn't come back around his family. So who knows? But that's how they got involved in the spiritualism movement. Practiced that up through probably the late 60s into the 70s.
Man, I think that's what draws a lot of people, and people that are interested in it because that's what drives, the sales of the books and the people that listen to the old radio shows and things like that, which again, look up Ghost Watch, Peter Underwood. If you love short ghost stories and just this wonderful way he had of telling them, He's got a lot of good ones on there, and I've seen him on YouTube and many other different little places. So just put in Ghost Watch Peter Underwood, and that'll pop up. And he had a little radio show. So on that radio show, he would talk about his investigation, and he was the president, I believe, of what was the name of the Paranormal something Society of, it's a pretty
Yeah.
big deal, very prestigious, and I think he held president for a couple of decades. But this is a bunch of upper crusty kind of guys, and they're very proper and using the tools that they had available to them. They're fantastic. Go back and watch these films of him going through Borley and how they sat in the dark. I mean, not unlike us. Decades later, same thing, sitting in dark rooms waiting for a light to blink or somebody to knock. We're doing the same stuff, but it was incredible to watch. And he's sitting there with his friend, and they're whispering and like, "Did you hear this?" And they get like this scratching and this banging and stuff, and they're sitting in Borley Rectory. It's incredible footage, So I would say if we're going to talk about paranormal television, we'd have to reach back that far and realize that it started not just around the dinner tables and the seance tables and the radio, also before TV, because you had me looking back, and man, we started looking at the paranormal early, when TV started to make radio look like, old hat,
Yep.
I mean, some of them were really good, like One Step Beyond. That was very early.
Yeah.
I don't want to look back on my Google.
Redid
but
that. They brought that back, I think, in the 80s, called The Next Step Beyond.
Did they really?
Yeah, it was another. It was the same type thing. And then
It was incredible.
even
It
some
had
of the
very
game
much.
shows and things like What's My Line, they would have guests on there that had psychic abilities and could talk to ghosts and
Sure.
things like that.
All the game shows. And again, that's one of the things that I saw too, looking up when the 50s and the 60s, they said the major stuff too was local television stations that would do local hauntings. And hey, especially we've talked about 1,000 times around Halloween.
On
We'd be
Halloween,
so
they'd
excited.
send one of the
as
news
kids.
anchors out to the local haunted house, and they'd tell the story. And a lot of times, everybody there knew it, but you didn't hear it outside of that little town or wherever the TV station was.
So true. And well, they're a gold mine of information, because they'll send the reporter to the haunted house, but how many times do those things actually produce good evidence? At least interesting evidence. We talked about it on the show too, and I believe the ghost story we talked about, Steve, was, I bet you'll recall it, because it was wild, and it was one of those things where, of course, we've had the ones where the radio station got in a boat and went out to a haunted boat that was wrecked,
Yeah.
and off the pier or whatever, and they said it was haunted, and they'd go out there and they were playing Ghostbusters, and the ghost started messing with them and took all their electric out, and all these other things happened. They didn't see anything, but there was a lot of odd things happening to them, so it was kind of like turned them to believers. But there's a better one, and it was on The Extraordinary, the show we were just talking about, and it was a radio station. And it was a radio station hosted by a man that had a real, kind of I could say soupy sales, but nobody young is going to know who I mean by that. Who's the guy that had the funny music? He was from the UK.
Benny Hill.
Oh God, he was so silly, but he was known to be very naughty, and he got away with a lot of stuff. It was just silly stuff. He was like,
Was it Benny Hill? Or,
yes, thank you. Perfect. He was a real Benny Hill kind of guy, but or like a Don Rickles who would get up there and say off-color stuff, or that kind of thing. So he was known as not really a shock jock, but a naughty one. So he goes with his crew, and they go to this haunted place, and he's all, yeah, right, okay, ghosties, boo-hoo, and all that kind of thing. And they're making fun of the whole thing. And he gets done playing the song, and there's a medium there, and she's sitting there through the last couple of songs, and they're hyping it up. And so they cut to it. They cut off the song, and he says some quirky little thing. And she says, "Okay, well, watch this." Or here, I'll show you what I mean, or something along those lines. And all of a sudden, she has the ability to manipulate energy, and she would pull forward these different spirits that she had been talking to, and spirit guides, and um, I guess enlightened beings and things like that. So they're sitting there watching her face morph and change into a Chinese man, and they're astonished by this. And then it morphed back, and then it went to hers, and then it would go to something else. So almost like you would imagine, we've watched, werewolves change on film, or um, somebody's face start to appear over somebody else's. They explained it like that. Do you remember this story, Steve? And the whole radio crew. Did I lose you? We didn't pull as a
Oh,
riot, did
no,
we?
I had my mic muted. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. We
I
thought we said
remember it, but
Do you remember it?
I remember it, but I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, it was on The Extraordinary. I know that for sure. And yeah, I don't know the man, the radio host guy. He's famous there, but I had never heard of him before. But he went in making all the making fun of this whole thing, and then he's seeing these extraordinary things, aptly named. So anyway, he said that the whole crew sat there and watched her face morph into 5 or 6 different beings, actually, or faces, if you want to say it that way. So after that, well, I guess after that you play a couple more songs or whatever he said. And then the next thing was she was walking the house trying to see if she picked up any earthbound ghosts, or whatever there. And while they were sitting and talking, him and I guess his producer, or at least one of the tech guys or somebody that was there from the radio station with him, they watch a full apparition of a female dressed in period clothes back in at least 100 years, dressed more like a servant type, with the white fluffy ruffled hat type thing that servants would wear, and the roughly kind of apron over a big skirt, not a hooped skirt, but a big full skirt that they would have worn, um, I guess, back then. So, whatever was going on in England back, you know, I don't know what year. I'm not a historian from there. I have a hard enough time pulling colonial America,
Yeah.
but it was similar to those times. So around here would have been like 1776. They would have been wearing something like that. I don't know in Britain if it would have been earlier or later or the same time, but that's what he described. And he said when she walked by, he said, "I don't know what to tell you." She walked by, I saw it. I could see through her. I could see the wrinkles in her skirt. I could see. That's how I knew the apron was ruffled. He said I could see the ruffles on a an apron that was over the skirt. And he said the way she walked, I watched it move. He said I could see through it. He said she looked like you and I. And he was just astonished. His whole face had changed from beginning to end. It was incredible because they had a couple of video shots of it because it was a promo for a radio station. So you got a couple of video shots of it. So he looked quite different from when they were setting up and unraveling the cables to get ready for this thing, making all the jokes and elbowing people and, making fun of the medium and stuff. And by the end of it, they were very quietly winding up their equipment and leaving in disbelief and amazement, So that's why those shows are so great, because if we didn't have shows like that, we're talking really basically mostly here about the realistic shows, because when most people are seeking ghost stories and paranormal, they want to be able to believe, I guess, going in that it's real. We'll settle for something that's made up and, out of somebody's imagination. If it's believable and you're basing it on realistic facts, if you're going to go full hog the other way, you got to let us know. Because
Right.
you see what I mean? That's how I've always felt about it. It's like if I know about it going, okay, this is going to be a silly slasher film, kind of thing. And then you know what to expect. But if you're going to tell me this is a true story, you better hold to the physics of it that, we know so far. You don't want to. I don't know how to describe it, but I think you know what I mean. We want to know when we're being lied to.
Yeah.
So how are we going to learn? right?
Sometimes they're based on a true story or
Yeah, yeah.
that type of thing. But at least they give you a little heads up.
Right, right, right. And they're going to take a lot of literary license, but who doesn't do that when you read the book? You're going to see a movie, and even though you keep telling yourself that this movie is made from this book and you know it, and it's been hyped up, you're ready to go, you love the book, your chances of leaving that theater disappointed are pretty high, because a lot of times it'll completely leave the whole story in its dust or whatever. And other times it'll try to get close, but it'll be that one major thing that was
Yeah.
important that they left out.
Well, like back
The
in the
change.
70s, some of those documentaries, from Sun
Yep.
Pictures International and The Legend of Bigfoot, and you think, oh, it's going to be a documentary. Pay your money, get your popcorn, you go in, you sit down, and then it's a
Yep.
bunch of goofy teenagers out in the woods like, hey,
Yep.
you think we can find Bigfoot out here?
Disappointing.
Gee, I don't know. I wanted to see something, even
Disappointing.
though
Give
the
me a
story's
witness
based
statement.
in truth, it's just some made
Show
up
me
hogwash.
facts, man.
Yeah.
And I think we started looking for the facts early, because that's why we focus so much on the realistic. Even though we'll mention stuff like One Step Beyond at a very early time. Think back on this for anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about. Again, there's a few of the episodes available on the internet. I don't know where you are. Sometimes different countries, your mileage may vary, as Steve says,
Yep.
but it's out there. So it opens up very much like a Twilight Zone. You've got your host, and his name escapes me. Steve, I can't get off my phone. If I get off my phone, you'll lose the mic. So if you want to look it up.
Rod Serling, the host of the
No, it
Twilight.
wasn't Rod. It was before Rod. They knew each other. And they had talked. They were in the same. They ran with the same crowd. Let's just put it that way. But this was called One Step Beyond, and
Oh
when
yeah,
it
it's,
first,
the guy with the creepy eyes. I
yeah, yeah,
can't think of his name.
yeah,
John
when it,
something, I think. Let me
yeah,
take a look here.
when he first came out, he would come. When the show first came out, it was produced.
Alcoa presents One Step
Alcoa
Beyond.
presents. Yes,
Yeah.
it was all about
John
tinfoil.
Newland.
There we go, John Newland.
He did
And
have
it
some
was all
creepy
about
eyes.
tinfoil, because Alcoa made this aluminum foil,
Yeah.
and it was a big deal. It was a huge deal back then. A lot of the shows were sponsored by a soap like Lux Theater, or Borax.
Mutual
20
of
Wheel Team Bjork.
Omaha's, Wild
Yeah,
Kingdom. Yeah.
that was getting fancy up in the 70s. But back in the early 50s, man, that was like you'd have oil companies that, paid for by, such and such oil. I mean, it was big. It was huge, crazy mess. Or cigarettes, or all those kind of things, Maxwell House and stuff like that. It was just really odd. And they would take on whole things like theaters or shows, or the whole thing would be sponsored by them. And we got out of that really quick. But that's how far back the paranormal goes. And the first thing he says when he comes out, he'll tell you this story is true. It's in the articles of such and such. It was in the paper, whatever. And they tell a true story. And I think that's what really got the juices going when you were a kid or a teenager, or housewife, whoever. Dad wasn't watching a lot of that TV. That would be nonsense to Dad back then. In the 50s, oh God, yeah. They didn't have time for that mess. They had to shine their shoes and make sure they wore the right hat and tie and stuff. They were busy bees. They'd leave the house and come back, get the paper, and maybe mow the lawn on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
That was your 50s dad, basically. Anyway, here in the Americas, anyway, that was the norm, I guess. But it was trippy to have a show that intense at that time, because this is even before Twilight Zone. Because keep in mind, this Newland guy and Rod Serling, like I said, they knew each other. There was actually some stuff written that there was some sour grapes going on a little bit between them, because the ideas of both shows were so closely related, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And I think Alcoa, I think the money was back behind this other show first, or it's possible Rod Serling was a writer or something on that. There was some kind of connection there, but it wasn't very long after that we started getting
came to the
Twilight
first
Zone.
episode of One Step Beyond, January 20th, 1959. and
Right.
Twilight Zone October 2nd, 1959. So maybe
There
that's
you
why
go.
there was a little bad blood
This
there.
is what I'm saying. Something was up there. Yeah, because they did now again, format different. Well, actually the formats were highly similar, but but Twilight Zone was imagined, you know, where the other one there was some of
Based
that.
on actual stories, but I think
Yeah,
Twilight Zone, Rod Serling, who's an incredible writer, don't get me wrong,
just
just made it out of whole cloth and said,
out of whole
what
exactly.
if, what if
Two totally
aliens
different,
came and
yeah,
they were teenagers on motorcycles,
sources.
something like that.
Yeah, two totally different sources, and it very had a very moral underlying to it. I mean, he was way above it, beyond his time, and had seen a lot of things, and it was a very intense thinker. He put a lot of himself into those stories, The Twilight Zone. A remarkable, well, the way they were
And a
written
lot
and
of it
stuff.
was thinly veiled anti-communism.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and don't be an ass.
Yeah.
I mean, and and there's creepy stuff out there. And what if? There was a lot of what ifs. You know, there was a lot of the man that kept saying, "I just want to be left alone to read. I just want to be left alone to read." And then some kind of catastrophe happens. He winds up being the only man, the last man left on Earth alive, and he stumbles through the rubble and starts to realize his predicament, and he stumbles onto the steps of the library, and he's like, well, at least I have time to read. And he stumbles up the stairs and he falls down, he breaks his glasses.
Yeah, it had those little twists there at the end, like, be careful what you wish for because you
That's
might
what I'm
just
saying.
get it,
Don't
but
be an
there's a
ass.
price. Everything comes
So
with a price.
that was the moral of every single Twilight Zone. There was a guy who was just horrible racist, so he falls down, I don't know, a ladder or something. He wakes up, and he wakes up the race that he was just putting down, and then he's the butt of that. And
Yeah.
then it happens again and again and again. I think that was Vic Morrow, which is a terrible story because remember when they were doing another
He died in
paranormal
the Twilight
show,
Zone movie.
Twilight Zone movie.
He got, killed in that. He and a couple of Vietnamese kids, were hit by there was an explosion that caused a
Yep,
chopper that they had on set to
yep,
spin out of control, and, it took his head off. That was
yep.
a joke, a morbid, dark humor joke back when that happened. Like, did you hear that Vic Morrow had dandruff? Oh, they found his head and shoulders in the bushes.
Oh God,
It
no,
was
I didn't
terrible.
never hear that one. No, but that was terrible. I remember there was something about the whoever was, I don't want to say the director or one of them, somebody that was on the movie was really pushing that helicopter to get lower and
Yeah,
lower and
I
lower.
think it was Spielberg.
Yeah,
When they
I,
brought up
I can't
there was
remember.
criminal charges and lawsuit and
Yeah, there was all
all
kind of
kinds of
mess.
stuff, but I don't remember
All
whatever
kind of
came of
hubbub
it.
went down.
Yeah.
It was terrible. The whole thing was a tragedy, but it's not the first time. I mean, people have been, doing stuff like that to
And
each other
there's
for
footage of
money
that.
and
There's
fame.
freeze
For
frame footage of that chopper hitting those actors.
I
It's
know,
horrifying.
I've seen it. Yeah, yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Just another bad thing. And they go on with it, and there's always that thing. It's like with Crow. The Crow came out, and poor Brandon Lee, all
Yeah.
that stuff. And they finished it by using CGI, very early CGI, with him walking in the rain and stuff. That was all after the fact, trying to finish that movie and put it out. And like he'd want us to finish. And, of course, what do you do in a case like that? Is it okay to fix it? Because that's happened more than once in
Oh,
movies.
yeah,
People,
Ed Wood used,
yeah,
his dentist to stand in for Bela Lugosi, but he kept the cape pulled up over his
he
face so you
did.
couldn't tell it wasn't him.
Hmm. That's so true. So many, so many. And you think about it, it's like, yeah, they would want us. I mean, how do we know what they would want? And honestly,
For real.
what's the right thing to do or what isn't? Who knows? I guess if you would give your life for something, you'd at least want it done out of respect, in a respectful way. I guess don't can the whole thing and forget about it. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, you can make a good debate for both sides. I think. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's one of those things I'm glad I don't have to make the decision on. But yeah, back to the paranormal TV shows. I really think One Step Beyond and Twilight Zone, um, they need to really be given a lot of credit. But I'd have to say if you're looking for paranormal shows that were based on true stories, I really think that One Step Beyond tried to get it right.
Yeah.
Really going back and trying to revisit
Dramatizations of true stories, and not
some
not
of
so
those
much
stories. Yeah,
investigative, but as a dramatic recreation of stuff that
yeah,
supposedly really happened.
yeah, yes, very cool. Yeah, yeah, and it was some really bizarre stuff too, Steve. I mean, I don't know when the last time you saw some of those stories, but I've looked at it for reference, and it's really crazy. And to think, and I often I joke, but you think about homes back in that time and what was going on in most of them. I know what it was like in mine in the early '60s with a house full of teenagers, everybody trying to borrow that one thing, whatever it was, whether it was the typewriter or
The
the
record
iron, the
player or the
freaking iron, or yeah,
yeah.
you know, or whatever it might be. Watch a TV show and arguing over the one TV in this great big old house. I mean, you think everybody had a TV in your room. You're sadly mistaken. There was one TV, and it was in the living room or the dining room or the rec room. Some people called it back then. And if your dad was home, he was the one telling you what you were watching on that TV.
Yeah,
And that
I
was
was the remote control back then,
yeah,
so get up and
that
change
was
the
pretty
channel.
much the way it was.
Yeah, put it on channel 10, boxing's coming on, that sort of thing.
Mhm. Boy, I'll tell you what, there's more than a few people listening that understand exactly what I mean when I say, man, you think you're going to watch something. Dad got home early and he wants to watch, combat or something, you
Yeah.
know, comes in and doesn't say a word, just turns in, flicks that channel. And you just saw everybody's sitting on the floor.
Like,
And their
"Hey,
daddy
I was watching the Munsters, what do you do?"
No, everybody's sitting cross-legged on the floor, elbow, head in their hands, elbows on their knees, and watching the show really good. And just get to the good part. Dad walks in and flicks it to the game.
Yeah.
Oh God, I remember. Yeah, in my house. It was always it wasn't so much the sports. It was some of it, but it was more the early World War II combat shows like Hogan's Heroes and Combat and all that kind of stuff. I can remember him watching. He didn't miss it. And then Honey West never missed that stuff either. Or FBI in color. Remember that?
Yeah.
They weren't paranormal though, Steve. But man, I'll tell you what, '60s, I think we started getting a little bit more. And you brought up one today. What was that, '70s? Ghost
Oh,
stories? Who was that?
that was, Sebastian Cabot,
Yep. That was
and,
Mr. French, right?
yeah, that was, early '70s, '72 to '73. Now, it was kinda schlocky. It was produced by William Castle, who was a famous horror film director. It's an NBC show, and each episode was like a different standalone supernatural or horror themed story, but they covered, ghosts, the occult, paranormal phenomena.
They're
Again,
more
ensemble
reality based,
cast. Yeah, the some of, kind of, I'm sure they took a lot of,
based
dramatic
on the truth.
license there,
Yeah,
but,
based on the truth.
yeah,
And
and,
it's kind
he
of like
wasn't the
a
only
love
one that
boat in a
that did
hotel,
that. There
in a
was
haunted
another
hotel.
one in the early '80s that I'd forgotten about, called Dark Room. Not dark room like a photograph, but a dark room, although I think they did use that kind of as a trope. But, James Coburn, remember him? That tough guy,
Oh,
actor?
yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, it didn't
He
last
was
long. I think it was like
creepy.
1 season of 12 episodes, but it's got a cult following, and he was the host, and he'd come on, and it was, it
Yeah,
was like
he was
Twilight
creepy.
Zone or later Tales from the Crypt, that kind of stories.
I heard a back end story of him once from, I had a girlfriend once. I'll tell it real quick. It's worth it. It's worth it. Steve's got groupies and rock and roll. So anyway, one of my best friends, she used to be this real how do you put it? There was a group of groupies that used to go around with big bands in the '70s, and they'd all kind of try, kind of like the people would follow the dead, but these were just girls that followed band, and they were real popular, and they'd interchange. I mean, I think every decade's got that. But anyway, she was one of them, and she was in LA, and she's at a party, and he came walking in the room, and she was excited to see him, and there was other stars there and stuff like that. She was trying to play low key. She was dating a drummer, who knows. So anyway, he comes walking in, and as she gets across the room to get up there to shake his hand, he had plastic surgery, and he had all these stitches still in his face. And she said it was the scariest thing she ever saw, and she just walked past him. She didn't even stop. She just kept right on going. Chuck Connors. Is that who you're talking about?
Chuck Connors, he was a rifleman. No, that was Jimmy Coburn.
Oh, well, never mind then.
Confused him and Lee Marvin because I remember him being similar, but Coburn
Never
was
mind.
another one of those Hollywood tough guys. But that's an interesting story about Chuck Connors.
I mean, you had to see her face when she
What
told
was
it.
the other one he did? Branded or something like that?
I don't know, but she said it was the scariest thing she ever saw. And this girl was, you talk about your paranormals. And she had a rough road. I mean, she was literally fighting demons. She was something else. She was a mess. Well, she had messed around some things she shouldn't have. You know the story, how it goes. And if Chuck Connors was the scariest thing she had ever seen, I don't want to see it. That's all I got to say, you know. So, but that's who I thought. Why did I think of his face when you said the others? I don't know.
Another Hollywood tough guy, you know. But
yeah,
I'm
maybe so.
James Coburn here, make sure I'm thinking of the right guy because
James Coburn. I know who that is. Yeah, Magnificent Seven. Oh yeah, he was a sweetheart. Heck yeah. He's right up there with Robert Mitchum.
He was out there with Steve McQueen and Charles Bronson.
Cool breeze. Heck yeah.
Our man Flint, Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid.
Yep.
Magnificent Seven. Yeah, he's another one of those.
Robert Mitchum kept his cool too. Yeah. He was definitely it was a real deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was something else.
Yeah, he went to jail for.
Yeah, how far did we get? We got as far as the 50s, Steve.
Yeah, we're taking a lot of side.
We're cooking
avenues here, but I'd forgotten about that one.
Which one? Say it again.
The one we just talked about, Dark Room.
Dark Room. There was another one you mentioned. The other, I wrote it down.
Dark Side, or let's see.
Yeah, I mean,
another one I'd totally forgotten about in the 70s. Of course, we had Leonard Nimoy in Search of.
Fabulous.
Arthur C. Clarke had one called Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. Do you remember that one? It was
no, I remember the name, but I don't remember the thing.
Network answered In Search of.
I don't remember the show, but I remember the name, Arthur C. Clarke. It's like one of those that you heard a lot in the 70s.
Fiction writer, yeah.
Yeah. And there was a lot of those good ones. I can remember going to the theater seeing Chariots of the Gods, and that came out right around the same time as Billy Jack did.
Yeah.
That's how far back we're going. But same theater, that's why I remembered it. But yeah, I mean, I think Twilight Zone kicked it. And there was a couple of other ones tucked in there, and you always got to mention Dark Shadows. That started the very early 70s. So, but this again, that's that's out of an imagination, all that,
But again, that's based on a true story. If you listen to John Todd, the guy that went around all the churches in the 70s and stirred people up about backwards masking and the satanic panic, laying the groundwork for that, his real name was John Todd Collins. And he said that was the famous Collins family of the Illuminati bloodline. The Dark Shadows was based on that family. So there you go.
It's a bloodline thing.
It was done like as a tribute to them, even though it was fictitious about vampires and werewolves and ghosts and stuff. It was a soap opera, a gothic soap opera, Dan Curtis production.
Very true. Very true.
That used to scare the bejesus out of me.
Oh yeah, watched it every day. Ran home. I think it was like kindergarten, first grade. It would come on right after my my grandmother's soap opera. So we'd watch it together. It was kind of our thing. And I played marbles on the floor. It was great.
I'd watch it, and that time of day she would always go. We had a chicken house way down on the end of our property.
Oh,
for whatever reason, that was when she went to gather the eggs, I guess before the hens went to roost. And she would always go while Dark Shadows was on, and I'm there like peeking over the back of the couch, like I hope she comes back soon because this is some scary stuff.
Oh, wonderful. See, that makes it so much better. One of the best times I ever had was when I was home from high school. I think I was I was a freshman, and I'm home and I've got the flu, one of the worst flus I ever had, the kind that puts you on the couch for like 2-3 days. Nobody wants to come near you. I mean, just bad. Home, call in sick. Notes were written. The whole damn thing. And guess what I was
1985.
reading?
Well,
Guess
The
what I was
Stand.
reading?
The
Yeah, I
Stand.
was reading The Stand. I was
Same
reading
thing
The Stand.
happened to me.
It was like
I was
3D.
place I was working at the time. It was a grocery store chain. They were giving free flu shots. I'd never had the flu, but I thought my friend's like, "Hey, come on, let's go take the shot. We'll get
Write
in the
the
back of
title,
the
Steve.
line. We're on the clock, so we'll get a half hour extra break." So I took the flu shot, and I thought I was going to die. I
Right
think,
there in
and,
the
and,
title,
and
my
that's
friend.
apparently that was what they did. They gave you some of the live virus so you could build the antibodies to it. But
Yeah.
I think I got a triple dose or something. I seriously thought I was going to die, and I'd gotten The Stand. I think it was in paperback, if our memory serves. That's been a long time ago. And I was laying there trying to read that, and
Yep.
dying with the flu.
You
I'm like,
got
oh
Captain
shit,
Trips,
I've
my
got
friend.
trapped in trips. I can't read this. I had to put it down and read it after
Oh,
I got it.
I leaned into that torpedo like nobody's business.
But
I
I
drank
haven't
that,
had the flu since.
being
So
covered in it to the
either
neck.
that shot gave it to me, or that was the best flu shot ever because I haven't had the flu since
Well,
1985.
like I said, that's right there in the damn title, Steve. It says flu shot. My God, they
40
give it to
years
you.
next year that I
They
haven't.
give it to you.
I don't get the flu. I don't get colds, any of that crap. But I have, like you hear me now, pollen, ear, nose, throat, ear infections and stuff. That's been the bane of my existence my entire life. And it was worse till I had my tonsils and adenoids out at 5. But you hear me right now. My voice is kind of in the outhouse because of the weather here in New England. I was out there in the desert, got used to that, and then moved here. And I'll be here a year next month. But it's taken some time. I grew up down south, everything pollen, damp, leaves in the fall. That all bothered me. Then I went to Florida, and that was pretty good. But then there was damp, and it rained a lot down there. That bothered me. Then I went to Las Vegas. Okay, the desert. Well, that helped my sinuses, but then the dust would get to me from those sandstorms and stuff.
Just take you
Moved,
out back and shoot you.
moved from there to Portland, Oregon. Okay, well, it rains all the time. Here you go. Have more of this. Then we went from Portland back to the desert of New Mexico, the high desert. That messed with me. Lived there about a year. And then here I am in New England, and I sound like a toad in a hole or something. So eventually,
If
need
you
to
came
find
here to New Jersey, I'd
some
straighten you
local
right out.
honey.
I'd fill you up with so much damn garlic and cat's claw you wouldn't be able to walk straight.
Local honey is the key. And that's where, like when I lived in Portland, there was a guy directly across the street from me that kept bees. Now that's as local as you can get. But I found out here, and this is a really crappy thing to do. There's a brand that they have at the grocery store here. It's a national brand, and it's called Local Honey. But it's
Because
made in
they're
California.
assholes.
Made in California. Yeah, they're
They
assholes. I
will
mean, like,
come
do you
around
have
every
local honey? Yeah,
corner.
it's right over here.
They
And then you
will
get it, and
flank
it says
you.
on the label, Local
It's a
Honey.
psyop.
But you
What
look
you just
on the
saw, my
back,
friend, was a psyop.
it's a psyop because they
I
know
told you.
local honey will work. So
A
they
damn
send you some
Campbell soup
local for
label
somewhere
psyop.
else. Yeah.
Attention all Ground Zero fans. Aftermath.media is celebrating our 4-year anniversary with a spectacular deal just for you. Wow! For a limited time, you can get an Aftermath Premium yearly subscription for only $79. That's right, just $79 for a full year of exclusive content, ad-free listening, and premium features. Dive into a world of incredible stories, top-tier journalism, and the best in entertainment. Whether you're a longtime listener or new to Ground Zero, this is the perfect time to join the Aftermath family. Don't miss out on this amazing anniversary special. Visit Aftermath.media today and sign up for your Aftermath Premium yearly subscription at just $79. But hurry, this offer won't last long. Celebrate with us and elevate your media experience to the next level. Aftermath.media, the ultimate resource for parapolitical and paranormal fans. Visit Aftermath.media and subscribe today. That's Aftermath.media.
Told you. It's like I said, I think being a kid of advertisers really helped me out a lot with the whole MK Ultra mind screw thing because it's out there, folks. It is. I mean, they have tried to
You mentioned the
subliminal
Campbell
message
soup
you.
label. I've
Oh
listened
my
to the
God.
whole conspiracy theory episode about all the stuff hidden on the Campbell soup label.
Mhm.
Oreo cookies, signs of the
Yep.
the Knights Templar or something are
Look
all
at your
over
money.
Oreo.
Look
Yep,
at your
there you go.
money. Look at
The
your
Great
money, honey.
Seal of the United States. It's an
Yeah.
eye floating above a pyramid. If that's the
They
Great
give
Seal
you
of the
something
United
dribble.
States, how come it doesn't appear on anything else other than the dollar bill?
They give you all kind of dribble about stuff. They just, Stalin said it, if you keep telling a lie long enough, and
People will believe it.
repeat it
Yeah.
over and over, people will start to believe it. And that's just the thing too. And the opposite works, because if they keep telling you aliens don't exist, you won't believe it. If they keep calling you conspiracy theorists, you won't believe it. If they keep
Yeah.
laughing at ghosts
And
and laughing at people who said they saw this or saw that or dog man or Bigfoot or a ghost or whatever, grandma in the in the living room, everybody just points and laughs and tries to make you look like a fool. And I think that's why we reached out
yeah.
to these shows, because we're sitting cross-legged in front of the Zenith in the 70s watching Leonard Nimoy take us through sitting. I mean, how incredible is this? You get to see Leonard Nimoy sit there and talk to Hans Holzler after Hans Holzer has just sat and talked to at least two ghosts that were in a house, and it was Kenny Buckport. I'll never forget it. Kenny Buckport, what a great name! Was out
Yeah.
there by you.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
close to me. I think,
yeah,
is that in Maine or Massachusetts? It's not
I,
far anyway.
it starts with an M. I couldn't tell you. The fact that I named the town is best you're gonna get out of me tonight. But anyway, that's incredible. Just look at
It
look who's
is in
sitting in
Maine.
that room.
It's
Yeah,
Maine, but it's about an hour and 53 minutes from where I'm sitting right now.
there
So
you go.
there you go.
There you go. Close enough. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, the crow flies.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about my ice there. I
And
apologize.
that's one thing. I just recently got a camera that does all kinds of really cool video stuff. I want to be boots on the
You
ground.
need
So
to.
there's so much here in New England, so
You got
many
to do it. You got to do it.
legends and stories and so much history here. Um,
Steve
to-
Stockton in the wild. I say do
yeah,
it. I say do
the,
it. Record
the
it. Put it all
houses.
up on the YouTube.
We looked at a house that was built in 1776. That you don't
Uh-oh.
get that at other places.
That's true.
And there's one. It was in New England. I don't remember where it was. It's the oldest house currently for sale in America. It was built in 1600 and something. Can you believe that? Think of the stuff that house has seen.
Yeah, right.
And probably
It's
still there.
incredible. That's one thing I love about out here is the colonial. I'm glad, I got to see it. I'm glad I got back out
The
here. My
Nicole did the
son's got
math. It
to.
was like
Incredible.
353 years old or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And see, we can only really go back what I'm sitting by. I'm sitting by Fort Monmouth, Revolutionary War, I'm sitting by, all of that, Trenton and gosh, West Point and the Hudson River and so many different battles out here. I mean,
Yeah.
Molly Pitcher's Well and all of these stories, these grand, and then all the houses that are around that are, Washington slept here, he was all over the place. And you see that colonial stuff and you see that culture and you see that history and you just wrapped in that. It's incredible. Like oh gosh, what is the name of that place? The Jamal Mansion. I can't remember the first part of it, but that was made famous because it's right up there in Manhattan, in the highest point in Manhattan, New York. And at the time, if you're going back to the, our Revolutionary War times, when Washington was out here looking for ground, that's high ground. And where you could see the view from that was incredible. So it was, anybody would be after it in the military point of view for sure. So he was there. He got pushed out and it got taken over and it was held for a while. It went back and forth there for a little bit because again, it was very sought after ground. And then the woman, I believe her name was, I think it was Elise, Jamal. She's this money grubbing kind of, she grew up poor. Her mom was poor, was said that they were prostitutes, just trying to make a go of it. I mean, back in the day, nothing's changed, right? People,
Just
people
trying
were
to make
people.
a buck.
No matter how far back Steve and I go, we always find out that human beings were human beings. They did, they did the stuff. So she's trying to hook onto a sugar daddy, basically. She finds this guy, this poor guy. How he fell for this, I don't know, but she poured it on. She's lying to him and she's saying that she's going to die and she's got this illness. She's not contagious, but she's going to die. and she just wants, to live a little before, and she's, wants to go to parties and she wants to be a socialite, and, she's hanging on his arm and laughing at his jokes. The deal. Oldest time.
Yeah.
So he marries her. She starts a going, and she happens to have a head for business as far as real estate. So she starts making him a lot of money. So he's not really complaining until she gets tired of him, and she decides to get the servant boy
Yeah.
to help her kill him in a carriage accident, air quotes. Okay. He lands, she's got this strategically placed pitchfork that the servant boy pushes him off the carriage, lands on this pitchfork. And they call the doctor who's in on it. His palms have been greased and he's been given a little extra money. And he waits around to treat this guy. This poor guy, they do the bandages, they wrap him up. The doctor leaves. She takes the bandages off and lets the guy bleed to death in his own bed. And the bed, get this, the bed used to belong to Napoleon. And she would drag people through the house to show them this bed. She liked to boast about the fact that she had all this great antiques.
That must have got
He
around.
died, and Napoleon bled to death by the hands of his ungrateful prostitute wife.
Yeah. Well, when I was in the
Napoleon's
Martha
bed.
Washington Inn in Abington, Virginia, I stayed in one of the suites there, and they claimed that was Napoleon's bed. He must have had a lot of beds, but I think I found out there was several different Napoleons. So, but either way, I slept in one of the Napoleon's beds. So there you go.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. You know what? You know what he died?
Napoleons, according to, I don't remember.
Interesting.
He the one that they exiled him and he tried to sneak back onto the estate to see Joseph.
He was exiled. The last stint of it, that went back and forth for a hot minute. But at the last stroke of his journey, he's exiled. He's on this island and he's in this room. Now he's sick. He just can't get well. He's always poorly. And it's, he's fallen into the melancholia. He's been exiled. He was this warrior. He's doing Napoleon. So he's hanging out in his room, in his bed, his last Napoleon's bed. And all around him is this wonderful ornate wallpaper. Well, the guy died. And they're digging around in him to try to figure out what killed him. Guess what killed him? Arsenic. Guess what's in the wallpaper?
Yeah.
Arsenic.
Yeah.
The sicker he got, the more he stayed in his room. The more he stayed in his room, the sicker he got. So he was taken out. That was you heard it here tonight, folks. Napoleon's Waterloo was wallpaper.
I'd never heard that.
That's
now you know the rest of the story.
The rest of the story. Yep. They used to put arsenic in the wallpaper. It did something for the brightness of the color or something like that, I believe. I might be off on that, but I think it had something to do with the vibrance of the colors. Listen, I can remember going to school and those soundproof ceilings that they put in were all asbestos.
Yep.
I mean, come on now.
Where I went to elementary school, the radiator pipes were wrapped in asbestos, and we'd sit back there with the radiator and pull strips of it off.
Yep. So this is why you want to know why we have so many paranormal television shows, guys. We can't get enough of those and the books and the ghost hunters and everything else. Is because they're killing us everywhere we look. They got ceilings over our head. They got it in the wallpaper. They had lead paint. We were eating lead chips. I can remember in the 70s seeing, what do you call those commercials? They come out, where they're pushing something, but it's like I forget what they call it, a public announcement or whatever it may be.
Public service announcement, a PSA.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for. And they come out and there's this poor kid standing in this crib or this bed, about 2-3 years old, looking out a window at a busy city over what like Bronx, New York looked like in the 70s, which wasn't pretty, my friends, trust me. And it was this black and white, and she's eating paint chips off the windowsill, looking out the window. And they're telling you, we got to change the paint, folks. We're killing the kids. And now I got people telling me, the people that I tap into every once in a while to see what's going on out there, and they may or may not be wearing tinfoil hats. They're telling me the reason they wanted to take away the lead paint is because the lead protected you from the EMFs coming from the microwaves. And I'm like, well, now that I believe, because they don't care about us or trying to kill us. So what do they care if some kids eating paint chips? They
Yeah.
they just propagated their way into your heartstrings and said, we got to save the kids that are eating the paint chips in their sad little, cities that, God bless them for having to live there. We can't do anything to help them. We're just going to make this commercial and tell you got to repaint your apartment. They've been just psyoping us since the get-go. Remember when we were talking, was it you I was talking to? We were talking about, I think the guy's name was Bernays. I don't know why he's reminding me of a sauce.
Yeah, there is a Bernays sauce.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm close to it. But anyway, you can go back and research it, folks. But you got to go way back because this happened like right after the First World War. And they were having a hard time. I can't remember who exactly initiated this, but it had something to do with the Dairy Association or whatever it was back then, and the meat packing people, all that kind of thing. The meat, the butchers and such. So they got with this guy and they said, look, we need this push. We want people to start eating more of this. Can you come up with something? And he says, sure. So he goes and he says, I need all the doctors to come. Can you have a place for me to invite all these doctors in? I want to interview them, short little interviews, but he says, how many do you need? I says, I want like 1,000 local doctors to come in here. And they do it. So this guy interviews all these doctors. Okay. I think it was 1,000.
9 out of 10 doctor type.
Exactly. Deal. So he's interviewing 1,000 doctors. His goal was to get 500 to agree to say yes to this. And the question was, do you think Americans are better off eating a light breakfast in the morning or a hearty breakfast with eggs and bacon and toast and butter and coffee and juice and, these things? And he kept asking the question till he got his 500. And then he went back and he promoted it after the fact and said that the majority of doctors, 500 out of 500, recommend that Americans eat a hearty breakfast. And that, my friends, is the reason you have bacon and eggs for breakfast. And it's happened.
The farmers.
It's such a big deal.
Bacon, it was eggs, the people that
propaganda.
Make flour for biscuits, the butter, the cream, the milk, the cereals. Everything, that's a promotion for the farmers right there.
Yep. And then he's up into like the 28-ish area, 1928-ish. He's working through and he's, everybody's tapping into his brain, he's a little here, a little there, and he's getting real famous. And then the tobacco industry came up and they said, hey, can you help us out? What does he do? He says, sure, there's a piece of cake. He goes and hires 50 out-of-work actresses that are working real cheap. Said, put on your best bib and tucker, get your hat, girls, and let's go. Meet me on the street. Go on the street, and he films them smoking, walking down the street. He's got a band following him, a high school band or whatever. Banners, people are holding signs. He hires all these people, slips them a couple of, back then, a couple of nickels, I'm sure.
Yeah.
1928-ish. And he puts on the newsreel, sells it to the newsreel that play in between the movies when you went to see a movie back then. That's where you got all your news. And said women have had enough. They're coming out of the shadows. They want to smoke in public just like men. He gave them all cigarettes and they're all walking down the street smoking a cigarette. The sales went off the charts. Then he goes back to his friends that he talked to earlier, the doctors. And that's how you got, just like Steve said.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 doctors.
The same guy then says, well, let's make special cigarettes for women.
Yep.
Virginia Slims. You've
Virginia
come a long
Slims.
way, baby, to get where you got to today. That's stuck in my head, And same thing with the Gillette razor
hedges. Yep.
Back in the day,
we got to make it curved.
And well, we've got half the population. How do we get the other half?
Well, we got to tell them they have to have the curved razors because they have curved.
And I can't remember the magazine, like Collier's or one of those ladies' magazines, about how with the new fashions, and this was, when the skirts were not ankle length anymore and the flapper dresses were off the shoulder. Oh, well, you can't have unsightly body hair. Ladies, you have to shave your legs and your underarms.
Yep.
There you go. Gillette Razor Company was behind that.
Yep,
100%. And women are still plucking and squeezing and waxing them, and they don't even know why.
9 out of 10 doctors recommend Camels.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I mean, and
Terry
look at all the
smokers would
stars,
rather
all the
fight than
stars,
switch.
all the stars, man. They came out and they remember when we talked about our Hollywood scandal guys. They talked about Steve McQueen, and Steve McQueen would come out, and I think he was doing, I want to say Parliament. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, he was a spokesperson for them for a little bit. And they
James
blamed
Dean pushed cigarette.
his death on his cancer on it. But you know what? That was a lie. It was not that. Guess what it was? The asbestos. And it wasn't in his school. It was in his driving suit. He was a race car driver.
Yeah.
I mean, you spend 10 hours a day. I mean, he was hardcore. He was like Paul Newman.
Yeah.
Paul Newman and James Dean. They were all very heavy into race cars. Paul Newman probably more than anybody.
John Wayne, who was a smoker, and
Yep.
he died of cancer.
They blamed
tried to
him
blame it on
too.
cigarettes, but actually, they think it really happened where they filmed some thing out there in the desert, out there where they'd done those atomic tests back in the 40s.
Genghis Khan.
And Genghis Khan, yeah, and everybody that was
Died of
on
cancer.
that set had some kind of weird cancers. So there you go.
So
Was it the cigarettes? Probably not. I mean, I'm sure that didn't help, but
Right. But still, the way they say it, they'll just sway it the way they want to sway it, and they do that in Paranormal all the time.
Used to push. I think it was Chesterfields in the middle of the cartoon. Fred and Barney would sneak out behind the rock wall and smoke a Chesterfield. You know, it was just
true. That's true. I mean, so many. I mean, did you know this creeped me out? I don't know why this creeped me out, but it did. Go back and look and watch Disney. Walt Disney talking like, you know, those little B-roll he used to do where he'd sit there and lean into the desk to tell everybody it was the up and coming at Disney World or the movie that was coming out. They started out in black and white and then they went to color. I can remember when that happened. And I mean, Walt Disney was just like, oh my God, when I was a kid, you know, I mean, gosh, how many kids can say that? A lot.
And it was Disney's World of Color. I mean, that was the whole thing.
Yeah. And he started the whole thing, his whole deal. Now, look, I mean, I know what he put forward to the public. I get that and what was behind the doors. We can talk all night with who he was friends with, shaking hands with Von Braun and all that. I know the stories, folks, but I'm talking about the persona he put out front when I was a kid and that vantage point of believing that, you know, and he opened Disney so parents and families, anybody could come and enjoy this world, you know, that it was going to be reasonably priced. So the working man could take his family. I mean, that was what was going on back then, 60s, you know, when that opened up, you know, and now it's so different. But when he did these B-rolls, Steve, all the films, if you went back and looked at them, I dare you to go in there and pull up ones now on the internet. It's been almost scrubbed with him standing there smoking. He always had a cigarette in his hand.
Yeah.
He was like Phil, you know, Morrow and all of them. I mean, they he always had a cigarette in his hand. And somebody went in there and brushed that cigarette out, CGI'd it right out. Of every single one of those B-rolls, it's incredible to see. I don't know why that's creepy, but it is, I guess, to think that somebody can go in and do that. But
now, did they really do that, or is that a Mandela effect?
You know, dude, now that you say it, I don't know. I got to be honest.
I noticed one the other day that I'd never noticed before, and I think I mentioned it in the chat on your show. Crossman BB guns. When I was a kid, it was CROSSMAN, Crossman. I had Crossman BB guns. Now it's one S, CROSMAN, and it just does not look right. I don't remember having one S.
Berenstein. I know, man. And I'll tell you what, that Shazam movie, I distinctly remember being in my living room, standing behind my kids. They're cross-legged on the floor in front of the TV, Next Generation, you know, much bigger TV in color, but but the picture's pretty much the same. And I'm standing behind him, and we're making fun of the pants that I forget his name now.
Wearing hammer pants. But I worked in a video store in the 80s. We had a poster of that. Nicole, she was born in 85, but she remembers seeing it at the video store when she was a little kid.
Yep. We watched that. We made fun of that dude because he was in something else. I can't remember what. The boys liked him and thought he was really cool, and he was always sporting cool clothes and stuff. I can't remember his dang name, but and then when he came in that and what he was wearing, we were kind of making fun of him, and they were making fun of him, saying he could have got something a little bit more cool, that they kind of looked a little sissy, you know what I mean? That's what their words. And they were, they were hacking on him. And we were laughing, and I'm like, yeah, but he's doing a good job. He's funny. We were kind of like kidding around with it, because listen, they were boys and they were getting that preteen kind of, you know what I mean, where everything was just, it was either cool or it wasn't. So
Yeah.
I remember that, and I remember the video cover sitting on the floor and looking at him.
Sinbad. Sinbad was a
Sinbad,
comedian's
thank you,
name. Yeah.
thank you.
Now,
Yep,
Shaq, he did make a genie movie,
yep.
but this was different.
It was different. It was totally different. I remember both of them. And Sinbad's come out and said that he had nothing to do with it. He has no memory of it. Never happened, and everything else. I'm like, dude, I watched you in them pants. You cannot just deny it. You can't pull an Eddie Murphy and go, wasn't me, wasn't me, wasn't me. You can't Stalin me and just keep lying, and I'm going to eventually just give in and believe it because I know what I saw.
Now,
And
the
that's how
one,
we are in the paranormal. I know what I saw,
there's
and I think,
two that really gets me. In the Bible, the lion who lay down with the lamb, it doesn't say that anymore. It says the wolf.
oh,
And there
wow.
used to be a place
No.
called the Lion and the Lamb. There was a Christian coffee house
Oh,
that
you're
I've been
kidding
to.
me.
It calls the
No
Lion and the
way.
Lamb. Now it's the Lion and the Wolf or something, or the
That's
Wolf
worse
and
than
the
the
Lamb.
Fruit of the Loom thing. It always had a cornucopia. Now
It
it
had a
doesn't.
cornucopia, now it doesn't.
Where
And
were you when this shift happened? I don't know.
I
Would
don't
we
know.
know it?
I
I
think
can't.
maybe the world did end
Could
in
we feel it?
2012 like the Mayans
And we
predicted, and
jumped?
we
Come
jumped.
on.
But the other one that gets me is I just lost it here.
Fruit of the
The
Loom?
James Bond movie with Jaws, the
The
actor
girl.
Richard Kiel, the girl with braces.
Yep,
They
she
even
had
made a
braces.
commercial later
Yep,
on that
yep,
parodied that. And
yep.
without that, it makes no sense.
That's 100% true.
That whole scene in the movie, nor the
Yep.
commercial they made later about the American Express card or whatever,
Something
it
big
doesn't make
happened
any
there,
sense.
man.
But
There's no
that was
doubt.
why they bonded. He had the big metal teeth, she
Yep.
had braces, and they had a little chemistry there. But now she doesn't wear braces. WTF?
Yeah.
That's no, 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 no,
Yep.
no.
100%. I'm right
Don't
there with
believe
you,
it.
my friend.
Don't believe it.
Right there with you. Yeah, and again, the cornucopia on Fruit of the Loom. Come on now. J.C. Penney. It was always pennies. Are we going to pennies? We're going to
Yeah,
pennies.
yeah. Well, my mom shop a little bit at Sears, but it's pennies. I've spent so much time in the Husky Boys section of pennies when I was a kid.
Yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, don't. What's that saying? Don't rain on me and tell me you're pissing down my leg. Something.
Yeah, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining.
There we go. Thank you. Boy, I had that backwards, didn't I? So okay. So,
Don't
but
tell me
see,
it's
that's
raining
the whole.
and pee on my leg.
But that's the whole reason that people like you and I, and probably a lot of the people listening
And
are
I'm not old
you
enough to be in
question
my
the truth.
dotage yet. I don't have
Give me the facts.
Alzheimer's. I don't have, I'm not don't have
Give me
short-term
the
memory loss.
facts.
I remember how stuff was back then. And
Yeah, give me the facts, man. Just the facts, because you can't learn. You said that earlier when you said based on a true story. Think about what that statement means. They say it so quick. Again, a
they
little
took
mini psyop,
one little nugget of
called a
something
micro
that actually
psyop.
happened, and they spun a whole entire 2-hour
Right,
movie over it.
right. And only the names have been changed to protect the innocent, or that's FBI. But anyhow, similar, right? So
Dragnet,
you
yeah.
look at that, but it says based on. Well, if you're basing your quest for answers in anything supernatural, paranormal, metaphysical, then you're building your house on sand. Because if it's not true, what are you basing it on? You see where I'm coming from? I know what they mean, but I know what it means. Because basically you've just given them permission to lie to you. And again, like I said earlier, I'm fine with it. Is this completely made up? Okay, wait a minute. Is this based on the book? Okay, because I read the book. Now that's different. I'm going in differently. If I've not read the book, I don't have a clue what the story's like. I've done that too. I've watched the movie and I'm like, okay, and I read the book's totally different. I go, okay, wait a minute. This is what this author was trying to say. It's a completely different message. You get my point? The same thing happens with paranormal. And I think that's why we strive so early, because look, if the buyers weren't there, they weren't going to be selling it, and they were definitely selling it, and they were selling it early. I mean, you can go back and there is, I almost mean this literally, there's almost no end. It's like Mel's hole when you start looking in the archives of old radio shows that were based on the paranormal, supernatural, suspense, mystery, even true crime. It was done more delicately back then, but not as much as you think. Some of that stuff is pretty brutal, you know, in some of these old radio shows. So we were looking for it then, and if you could get that, I mean, if you were lucky enough to be living in anywhere, any town USA back in the 50s, and you were lucky enough to have a transistor radio in a tree house or an attic or a room or someplace
Exactly.
you could go off by yourself, and you could listen to one of these and they're talking about alien abductions and UFOs and things like this, or even if they were made up stories, but if they were saying it was true, that made all the difference in the world. You're like, oh man, this could happen, and it would get your imagination going. And it might have been you wanted to get a telescope and look at the stars, or you wanted to I don't know, 10,000 other different things that kids were running around doing back then. It had the same effect as watching the Lone Ranger had, where you wanted to get a potato gun and go shoot the neighborhood kids and hide behind trees. It
Yeah.
had that same effect because it was so profound back then. That's all you had. You had TV and you had radio. So you heard only the songs that were going to be played. You didn't have 10 million choices. You had 3 channels if you were lucky with a good antenna. If your dad sprung for the good antenna that, stood up in the wind, how many, you go down in the early 60s, you go down the street and every house had an antenna on it.
Yeah.
And then you had that one guy on the block with this massive thing. It looked like he was trying to reach Mars. But everybody talked about, oh, I get you. You hear dad or your uncle or whoever say, he's affecting my television waves. It's his fault I can't get the game on Sunday. That kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But you'd hear this, folks. You'd hear this. But inside of that were people looking for the truth. And if they weren't watching it, it wouldn't have been put on there. And there's so much on there and so much, like I said, just starting with the radio. And then you started getting the shows. You started getting, your One Step Beyond, your Twilight Zones. But gosh, One Step Beyond, that's true stuff. This really happened. That lady really did see her brother after he passed. And he came and said goodbye. That's incredible. My aunt was talking about a story like that, or something like that happened to me. I saw grandma, or whatever, the guy that walks out of the closet every once in a while, whatever it might be that happened to you that got you interested in this subject, or you're just like to be scared. Some people just want to be scared. Boo, and that's fine too. But there was a quest for this true reality, early reality stuff. And I think that really started getting a kick. There was a few in the 60s, that escaped my mind. Some of them that you mentioned that I had never heard of, that I'd love to see. But there was one where you sent me a picture and you asked me if I'd ever heard of it. One of them was Ghost Story, which was, again, it was kind of like an old hotel, a very fancy Victorian type era, maybe a little Art Nouveau, with Mr. French from, what was the name of that show?
Family
Affair.
Yep.
Yeah. And he hosted it. It was kind of like a paranormal Love Boat. Each one would be a different story, and some of it might be based on true, but it was very, elaborated upon, and dramatized. But it was kind of like that kind of feel, kind of like an early Tales from the Crypt, even. The host wasn't quite as creepy. He was more of a gentleman, kind of mysterious guy, but in the velvet smoking jacket kind of thing. But it really started kicking in with In Search Of. And then In Search Of, which came out at the same time as you were starting to get Chariots of the Gods and Monsters Among Us. And what was that early one?
In Search of Ancient Astronauts and all the
Yeah,
Bob
yeah.
stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
had those books.
Yeah. The Nazca lines and the battery that, they found in some place in Egypt, that the same time as the pyramids, they were electroplating jewelry and doing all this stuff. And I'm just like amazed, and the Bermuda Triangle, gosh, that was so big. Oh gosh, that was so big. All that stuff was hitting right around that time. And Leonard
Charles
Nimoy
Berlitz.
was just
Charles Berlitz. Yeah.
oh, Berlitz. Oh yeah. And Nimoy was just tearing up because now what happened with In Search of? I don't have all the details, but basically there was 3 kind of moviettes. So you can imagine what we would call them back in the day would be like the Friday night movie or the Saturday night movie, and it would be produced by CBS or NBC, ABC. They all had them. So you'd look forward to it. You might see something that was kind of theater quality-ish, or it might have been in theaters and they just chopped it up for TV and edited it. You'd always get the edited version.
Yeah.
But some of these were made and just kind of missed the theaters and went to the TV and would be on Friday night's movie or whatever. So Rod Serling did, I want to say 3 of these. And they were all similar to alien abductions, UFO, this kind of thing. So there was 3 of those that were very much the same type of format as In Search of. In fact, some people even thought they were old In Search of episodes, but they're not. They're longer. They're about the length that you'd have on a movie with commercials, for television. So about an hour and 20 minutes, something like that. Yeah. And that went, okay, we're spinning off a show on this. Everybody loves it. There's such a hunger for this information. Let's put it out there. They went ahead and signed the series, but it didn't get launched and get put on till around 77, I think. And Rod Serling passed in 75. So Leonard Nimoy took over. And Leonard Nimoy had hosted the last movie because of the very same thing. So they had the series and the last movie going at the same time. Where they're filming it and stuff on location. And I mean, that show went everywhere. If it was a haunted castle in England, they were at the haunted castle in England. There's Leonard with his boots on and his bell bottom, plaid polyester pants, his ascot with his foot up on on Stonehenge, you know what I mean? And he's going to tell you about it. And it was fantastic. And like I said, you could see him sitting there talking to in Kennebunkport, talking to Hans Holzer. And the most amazing thing is you're watching him talk to a trance medium who's talking. The ghost of that house is talking through the medium and telling everybody that the reason she's haunting this house is she passed and I guess her husband was away and she's kind of still in that loop of waiting on him to get home because there's so many chores to do and she's overworked and she's overwhelmed and she just like to get out of here and go back to the city where she's from. She doesn't like this farm stuff waiting on a captain on a ship. And this poor girl, you find out that this guy died. The reason he didn't come back is the ship sank and she had some kind of scarlet fever or something and died half crazy out of her mind with fever. And the poor ghost is stuck in this, and you just watched 3 living human beings and a camera guy help this ghost to cross over and get out of her torment in a short amount of time. I mean, I'm sure they were there a lot longer than they showed on video, but still, you got to see that, and that was 1977. That's incredible television,
And
I mean, you'd be lucky.
That's incredible. What a segue. The first place I ever saw the story about the
Yanni
Toys R Us ghost, Yanni Janssen, that's incredible.
Yep, with medium Sylvia Brown. Yep, but she was young. She was probably about 30. And they got her to come in and talk to him. Incredible.
Now and made fun of, but she did some cool stuff.
Yep, she sure did. She helped a lot of people, and everybody likes to focus on the last couple of years. But again, I tell everybody, when you see somebody with abilities that's actually making a difference in helping spirits cross and helping the living deal with whatever they're going through and yada, yada, like people like that do, especially over decades, it can't be taken away from her, I don't care how many people come up and go, she didn't get it right on the nose. I don't know. She told me this and yada, yada. And I know all about all the other stuff. But here's the deal. When you're making a difference, you're attacked by the other side doesn't want you to win. The darkness just really focuses on you and they will destroy your life and they'll tear you apart. And after a while, it gets very taxing. It's very hard to keep up that battle. And they start getting some good left hooks in. and you see it happen to one after the other after the other. The smart ones pull out early, but when you see someone go through, like, a couple of decades of that, it's extremely physically
It
and
takes its
emotionally.
toll. Yeah.
Yep, yep, it sure does. And you're watching somebody literally daily going through a spiritual battle because of all the people that she's helped, all of the entities she's pissed off, all of the earthbound spirits that she's bumped into that weren't so nice, and everything else. And after a while, it all starts building up, and you'll see people like Amy Allen pulling out. And she's a smart girl. She's had enough.
Um,
She'll go on a
Chip
hiatus or
Coffey.
whatever.
Chip
Yep,
Coffey's another
same,
one.
same.
He got off into some
Smart.
stuff, and they accused him of what was it? He would have the psychic kids or whatever, and people were saying, "Oh, these kids aren't psychic. They have got delusions. They need mental help,
Mhm.
not
They put
Chris
him
or
through all
Chip
kind of
Coffey."
mess, and then
They
they
put
took
him
it
through
from
hell,
him.
and I think he retired.
They
I haven't
pulled a
heard anything
Ray Van
about it.
on him. They took his
Yeah,
idea, they took his vision and his idea, and then they took it from him, gave it to somebody else for a while, and then put him through all kind of. And again, he's a true dude, and Chip calls it like he sees it. He doesn't play, and he's just I think he's a fun individual. I really do, but he is extremely gifted and talented, and
yeah,
and takes no bones about it. You're going to pay him for his time, but he's not excessive. He's reasonable when you look at all this other stuff. But here's the deal: people don't take on their own responsibility for their energy. Now, if you just break it down, take all the feeling and emotion out of it, and just hear me through for a second. Try to take this emotion out of it and just listen to the facts. You walk into a room with a medium or a reader or a psychic with your energy. That's your responsibility. If
yeah.
you're going
You
into
brought
that
stuff
room,
with you. You brought
yes,
stuff with you.
yes, and honey, your baggage, it could use some patching and maybe a new, an upgrade, because you've been dragging around
At least a coat
that
of paint.
baggage. So if you go in there and the whole drive there and the whole thing you're setting up, making the appointment, doing all the things, and the whole thing you're thinking is like, I got to get a hold of my dad because I got to hear, he's got to tell me the thing I want to hear. Or I got to get a hold of Aunt Sally and I got to know where this is and I got to know what does she mean by that? Or whatever it may be. If you hear my voice and how I'm saying it, it's all about me, and what I need to hear and what I want to hear and who I want to hear from and what I want to hear them tell me. In some ways it can be good because you're like, in a good way version of that, it would be, I just want to know my mom's okay. I just want to know my dog is all right. Okay. That's a mild version of that. The other end of that is an extremely negative, very earthly things, materialistic things, needful things that are very connected to the lower vibrations of earth. So it would be, I got to hear, this fight has to end. If you're going at it with any kind of negative emotion like that, you're blocking your reading. And your medium, your psychic has to fight through all of that to get to your loved ones, which is a totally different vibe. Okay. And get to people that you may be familiar with, go past what your guides are telling her guides. No, she needs to hear this. She's about to hit a tree in her life, face plant, and she needs to chill out and let go of a lot of these things and just focus on this. And you're trying to make the medium override it because you want to talk to Uncle Bob to find out where you know the key to the safe is or something. And it's like, so two different things. What's important on the other side, what their vantage point is, looking at your life. They've got, I don't want to say the whole cover to the box of your puzzle, but they got a good chunk of it. And they're trying to give you information that you need to hear now, not what you think you need, what you need to hear right now. If you walked into a meeting with anybody that reads you with an open mind and the intent of, I just want to hear what my guides need me to hear now, and I'd love to hear from any loved ones who can tell me that they're okay. Your reading is going to be so much different than, I'm going to have this, this, and this. And if they don't tell me this and give me this specific thing and tell me what color this was, that's not how you go about a reading. And a lot of people block it, and they give a lot of people, really good readers, a bad name for no reason. Now, the ones we mentioned here, I can tell you personally, I know that people like Chip Coffey can override that because they see through all that, and they're very honed in their craft. But if you have somebody else that's extremely sensitive and likes to stay in the higher vibrational realm of reading, you're making them fight already. It's like you went in there and you took their anchor or their boat and threw it in the water, and now they
Yeah.
can't move. So think about it that way, because you have the same effect on ghosts that way as well. What you're going to draw and what you're going to, actually put up a barrier against because of your vibration. And when you think about it like that, it's different. And I think that's another reason why a lot of people are drawn to these more reality based. And when I say that, it sounds so different from what I mean, because we've given this name reality based show. We think Jerry Springer, we think Bachelorette, we think, and which are so far from reality, I assure you.
Yeah.
And what I mean is a paranormal television show that reaches in, respects the subject, respects the witnesses, respects the facts, and is willing to tell you if something is wrong, or we've been mistaken, we had the wrong idea or the wrong fact earlier. This is this newfound evidence, whatever. Put it all on the table, just the facts, ma'am, and let us decide for ourselves. And I think a lot of new people are doing that. Like if you shoot to now, where you've got like your podcasts and things like that, I think a lot of people are trying to do that. A lot of these shows, and especially people like Nuke's Top 5, who will show you ghost clips or unexplained video clips and say, you decide, is it a hoax, is it real, what do you think? And of course you can't answer that after watching 30 seconds of video of total strangers. You have no idea who this is, where it came from, or what, but there's something in us that seeks that, and I think it always has. And that's why the shows were popular then, the radio classics, made up or otherwise, popular then, and popular in the 80s and the 90s. And look at how much they've changed in the 2000s, and now we're up to 2020. Oh my gosh, where's the time gone? And they've completely changed. Now it's all over dramatized. Every time something creaks, it's a demon, or it's Get Out, or it's the woman is brushing her teeth in the mirror, and her actual words, because she's there telling her story, she says, I was brushing my teeth getting ready for work, and I felt like I wasn't alone, like I was being watched. And the camera pans back, and there's a 12-foot blue horned demon standing behind her, smoke coming out of its nostrils. She never said that.
Right.
When did we get to the point where we have to have that kind of visual stimulation to be scared and to get the story? When it used to be, it was enough that she got creeped out when she was in the bathroom. She always felt like there was somebody else there.
The good shows were theater of the mind. They didn't show you, as Stephen King
Right.
says, the shape under the sheet. They
Right.
described it, and that was his reasoning, was whatever you conjure up is 10 times scarier than what he's going to, if he wrote it out. Whatever
Right.
you imagine it to be, that's the scariest thing for you. So that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And again, we've become, of course, the obvious thing, we've become very desensitized, where the same things don't creep us out. But I beg to differ, because I think if you go back and you watch a movie that was, okay, let's say, oh gosh, it creeped you out. I have to say the original Blob creeped me out, because I thought it was creepy. It might look cheesy now when you see it.
Steve McQueen again. But
Yeah.
it was, I watched that on like the Late Show or something
Right.
like that.
I
After my
mean,
parents went
Night
to
of the
bed,
Living Dead.
scared the crap out of me.
Night of the Living Dead, that would creep you out. Rosemary's Baby creeped me right out.
Oh,
Crowhaven Farm. Are you kidding me? That's creepy. That's 1972, I want to say.
Race
That's
with the
with
Devil.
Hope Lang.
Remember that one? Race with the Devil scared the shit out
Oh
of
yeah.
me.
Oh, that, those were some of the ones where Crowley started getting involved in these, and there was real stuff in that mess, man. I'm telling you the truth. Just like when they certain groups
The
would take
Devil's
albums
Rain
and
with Ernest
yeah,
Borgnine. That
that's
one was
another one. That's another one. I'm telling you, it was creepy then. It's creepy now. And now that I know what I know, it's even more creepy because they were doing
Colony
stuff.
of Harvest Home.
Absolutely
Yeah.
did it right in front of our faces, just like they're doing now. But I mean, nothing's changed. It's just they've gotten bolder, you know. But yeah, I mean, the Crowhaven Farm. Okay, it's your typical story. The guy is working in New York. They want to get a rural house, so they go out in the middle of, I don't know, New York State, maybe somewhere. They're an hour outside of New York. This poor schmuck is going to be schlepping it back and forth from this new farm they just bought to Manhattan every day, an hour one way, the next. But you know, people did it. It was popular. It was something you heard people commuting all the time. It was crazy. But that's the first scary thing. An hour in New York traffic. Are you kidding? So they go to this farm, and right away things are creepy. The neighbors are extra nosy, showing up with apple pies and just showing up in the kitchen, standing there. Oh, the door was open. That kind of creepy, jumpy stuff, but it's creepy if it happened to you in real life. Think about it. You turn around and hear somebody you never saw before holding an apple pie standing
Yeah,
in your kitchen.
they're jump scares for a reason because that kind of
Right.
stuff scares
Because
people.
they don't, and what do you do in a situation like that? Hi, I'm your neighbor. The door was open. Oh, does this happen all the time? You get the hell out. So anyway, this kind of stuff's happened. There's a creepy little girl next door. It's just creepy just standing there. And then she speaks and it gets worse. And she's saying weird stuff like, when does your husband come home? He's awful handsome. And you say, and you just know there's going to be trouble there because she's like 13 and you're like, what the heck's going on here, little girl?
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, shoot forward to the end of the film, she's got a baby. She's had a baby. There's been hard times through the whole thing. He's not coming home. He's staying in the city a lot. The traffic, and the neighbors are popping up in every room. Door was open, still happening, and this little girl saying weirder and weirder stuff. The next thing you know, they're all there. She wakes up. She's under a door. They're putting rocks on top of her. They're all wearing these pilgrim outfits. And she finds out that she was really a witch that turned everybody else in. They're all witches.
Oh,
She
wow.
got them all burnt at the stake, and she lived. All right. The little girl was actually married to her husband, who is also a witch. He's in on the whole thing. How creepy is that? And she's come back in this life to take the husband back and her baby. So she's got her baby, and they're putting rocks on top of her. End of movie. The end. That's creepy. I don't care who you are. 1972.
Yeah.
Are you
It was amazing. Yeah. I'm just
right? But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that scared me because I never trusted people, but I grew up with a healthy dose of understanding. You just don't go moving willy nilly into a town you don't know anybody. They could all be witches wearing pilgrim outfits, and next thing you know, you're under a door getting rocks put on top of you. It's a good life lesson, Steve.
I love it.
You know what I mean? It's crazy, but they all had morals. Rosemary's Baby, morals. She moves into this old, well, famous actually, uh, apartment building in New York. Same thing. Husband gets a new job. They move. She gets pregnant. Oh, she's so silly. All the stuff happened. Oh, she's just emotions. It's emotions. It's because you're pregnant. So they hush her up and they shut her up and they start giving her this nasty goo to drink because more nosy neighbors popping up in your kitchen, uninvited, right? Old couple, so you give them some slack because they're old and eccentric. And this old woman's making her drink some green stuff, and she's drinking it because for the baby.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is going on. Well, what happens? They slip her a Mickey. The next thing you know, she's doing it with the devil. And she realizes halfway through, this is real. This is really happening. Everybody keeps telling her never happened. She's got scratches all over. She believes them. Propaganda. If you tell a lie over and over enough, they can make you think you're crazy and gaslight you. Another moral to the story. And before you know it, she walks in the room. She has the baby. It looks like, I don't know, the Jersey Devil or something. It's got yellow eyes and horns, and much like our friend breathing down the neck of our, all growing up in the bathroom there. Or just a demon. And they're all witches. So again, moving into a place you don't know your neighbors.
You're
Don't
there
drink
alone.
don't drink the green stuff, and don't breathe the wallpaper for the love of God.
You'll end up like Napoleon.
Like Napoleon's Waterloo, I'm telling you. But you can't tell me those movies aren't scary. And they didn't need a whole lot of goo and gore. They just told the story and it unfolded. Yeah, they used, music in all the right times, the tempo and creating tension and things like that. But you never saw anything except at the very end, I think they did a real quick flash of the kid's face. You know how like they used to do a quick flash of the eyes or something, and they were
Yeah.
yellow, hideous. But that was it. They didn't need all this other stuff. And the reason they need all this other stuff is because they don't let the story breathe. They don't tell the truth because the story is enough. There
Yeah.
was a here's a good example. I hate to keep rattling on, but you know me and ghost stories. One just it's like Pringle, potato chips.
Can't eat
So
just one. Yeah.
I can't, So I have paranormal Tourette's, Steve, and you know this. It's just, so
That's a good thing.
paranormal Tourette's. So, oh gosh, what story was I going to tell you? What was I talking about? Pringles. What was the last story? Oh shoot, I lost it.
Rosemary's Baby.
Okay, good. Yeah, so you got Rosemary's Baby. They were scary, and that was early. And then you had In Search Of, and we talked about In Search Of and how he actually would go to the different places, but they didn't embellish on the story. In fact, I think Nimoy actually hosted it kind of cheeky. Like he was really into UFO and stuff and things like that. Of course, people expected from being Spock and all,
Right.
but the ghosts and stuff like that, I think he held it with a lot of respect. He did a couple different ones. The castle, he did the one in Maine there, and another one. But they also looked into odd things, like they might look into Count Saint Germain, or they would look into Nostradamus.
Yeah.
Um,
ESP, things like that. Things that are
yeah,
fringe
ghost people.
subjects, but not
Yeah,
pure paranormal or supernatural.
right. Maybe cults, maybe witchcraft, maybe just all kind. I mean, I think it ran 2-3 seasons, and then it kind of went into the earlier one, like we were talking about, like in the 80s. There was like um Beyond Belief. Do you remember that one? You said the that's incredible, and that was
Beyond
a little
Belief.
bit.
Wasn't that Bill Bixby that did that one? I think. Or am I
No, it
thinking
was,
something
oh
else?
gosh, I forget his name, but he had that magician kind of beard and haircut. You remember him? And he always wore a suit, but he liked his puns. He was very punny. He used to come out and all these different puns, but they would tell like 3 or 4, I think it was 4 different stories. They would play it all out. It would be some like wild thing, like Beyond Belief, right? And
Yeah.
then you had to guess fact or faked. Fact or faked. That was one of the first ones that came out like that. So it was fun for the whole family, like people, I believe the guy with the trumpet, I don't know. I really believe that one, the lady in the car, that one looked like it was real to me. And it would start conversation in the house, which was unique. It gave you that chance to choose. And then at the end, of course, that big crescendo where you right or wrong, you got it right, that kind of thing. So it was a good show. It had that extra, if you think about it, it was kind of unique.
Shatner did one like that too. What was his?
A Weird World or something, I think.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something in the early 2000s, I think. Around that, 2000, 2010, maybe. Maybe it spanned longer than that too. I don't know. I mean, you had all the other ones too. Your Tales from the Crypts, your Goosebumps, and of course those were books first, and they came out
There was one just
late
called
late 80s,
Monsters.
early
You
90s.
remember that one? Monsters is kind of like Tales
Yeah,
from the Dark Side.
yeah. And there was a couple, like I said, that you had showed me where it almost looked like there were investigators, but I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't familiar with them. I don't know if it might have been when I was gone in the military and stuff too. There was a lot of stuff coming out on Showtime and things like that around that time, because I remember when Showtime first came out, it was a big deal. Like they had The Howling or something on, and it was like, oh my God, this is huge, like stuff you'd go over somebody's house to watch because it was a big deal, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. When cable first started, now nobody gives a crap.
Yeah. When I was in high school, among my little circle of friends, we were the first house to get cable. So everybody piled over to my house and want to watch HBO and Showtime till 4 o'clock in the morning.
You're gonna laugh. when you hear the first movie I ever watched on cable, and it was a premiere, so it was the first time it was ever shown. So it wasn't like, 10 years later. It
Weird
shows
or What? Don't mean to interrupt you, but Weird or What was the one that Shatner did.
Weird or What? Cool. So I was close. What was the first movie? You have to remember it. You ever saw on cable?
The first one, All That Jazz.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny. All That Jazz. I remember that.
Roy Schneider.
Yeah.
On HBO. My friends came over. We just got it hooked up. That was the first movie that I sat and watched all the way through because, you had like 100 channels suddenly. I click. But came over and that was what was coming on because HBO.
That's a big deal. I can still remember the sound and them rolling out the rating, like it was an R. It was a PG-13. It was a PG. I remember when you didn't even have the ratings. I remember when they still had the rating of, I think it was G, and then it was PG, R, X, and triple X. I can remember that was early 70s, I think. And I remember when they used to tell before a movie that was family friendly. That was around the same time they used to tell you it was 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? That was around that era. And all that right in that time, the paranormal stuff that was on was the ones that we mentioned, but just getting started. I'm not really recalling. I think that In Search of went over into the 80s, and I think That's Incredible did too. I'm not sure about what was going on in other, like across the pond, but I know Most Haunted started pretty early. Was that in the 2000s? It certainly wasn't the 90s.
Scariest Places with Linda Blair. That was like in the 90s, I think. They all kind of blend together after a while.
I know after that it does, but it was. That one didn't last too long. There's one that started on Showtime, but I think it was in the 90s, and it was called Poltergeist: The Legacy. But that was like
I remember that one.
I never remembered that. Must have been working.
And then there was like an X-Files type thing back in the 80s called Warehouse 13 or something like that. Do you remember that one?
And that's very much, it sounds like this other shows like that. And then there's one now, I think it came out in 2000, The Librarian.
The series that wasn't about, the Jason and all that. It was kind of an X-Files type thing. Friday the 13th, the series had Romy or Rory or whatever her name was.
There was one, I had it here. I might lose the mic for a second, but it was called Unexplained Files Classified. That had 4.
Yeah, I think you lost your mic.
I was looking. I thought I might lose my mic. I got you back?
Yeah, you're back now.
So it's one called The Unexplained Files. It was, I think, in the 90s or late 90s. But when you go back and you look at the 90s, that's when we got shows like Unsolved Mysteries. And they had that format. Of course, they added in, the true crime and, the lost loves and all that kind of stuff. But they would do the show. They would do the paranormal, supernatural. They were all over it.
Yeah. Well, Cisco, I hate to stop you there, but we are out of time. I'll have to have you back and we'll continue this conversation. But,
wow, man, we did it.
2 hours flew by, and I know you're tired and ready to go to bed.
Oh my gosh.
But thanks for joining me here on Everything Out There on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. I'm Steve Stockton. On behalf of Cisco and myself,
good night, everybody.
A little further on down the trail. Tell your animals we said hi. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.